We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will get there. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will get there. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will get there. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will get there. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will get there. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. It will be hard, we know, that the road will be muddy and rough, but we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will get there. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. It will be hard, we know, that the road will be muddy and rough, but we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know, we will. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will.
When I was 11 years old, I was given an extraordinary opportunity to go to Africa, to Botswana specifically, into the Okavango Delta in particular. I had no idea what I was signing up for. I was essentially signed up for it by my dad, and I went. And on the plane ride, a small bush plane, right before arriving into Maun, I fell into unconsciousness. My friends that were with me tried to shake me awake, tried to really rouse me because they were seeing elephants and giraffes right beneath the plane, and they didn't want me to miss it. And I was somewhere else. I was gone. They could not wake me. I finally woke by myself right before the plane hit the ground, and it was like coming out of what I would imagine is a coma, like a coma. I had just been so in another galaxy. And I'm like, where am I? And then boom, we hit the ground, and as my feet touched the hardened earth there, as my feet hit the ground and connected with the magnetics of that place, I had another worldly experience. I had come home, and I suddenly knew it. Every day of that 10 days of being there, I kept crying. I was crying tears of joy, tears of mystery, recognition. I was home, and I was among my people. Everyone that I met from there, I knew as kin. I loved them so much. I understood them deeply. They had a purity that I had not known in America, and at 11 years old, I got to be with it again outside myself. And I could tell from this new vantage point that it wasn't that America didn't have purity, it was that it was ill. Its consciousness was under the weather. It wasn't in touch with that of itself. That's how all that felt to me. Here in Botswana, it was alive, it was well. Every living being still had its own agency. Each was sovereign and not beat down or subjugated yet. I was so impacted by this in such an indescribable way that I didn't want to go home. I was 11 and I never wanted to go back to my family. I fantasized, strategized how I could run away into the bush, into wherever. I was ready to walk into the bush rather than have to get on a plane and go back. When I returned to the States, I would spend hours on my back looking up at the clouds in the grass until I was back in that delta, in the tall grasses of my true home, looking up at the sky. It was summertime, and I would do this for hours as a kid, day after day in the morning. I was determined to make it my life's mission to get back there and play out a life that was there, as soon as I could. Within a year's time-ish, mind you, I am now about 12 years old at this point, I got a message arriving so strong in me. You are not to go back to Botswana. That was another lifetime. You were born in America for a reason. You were meant to touch your original home there. You were meant to resolve something about it. And your life and your work and your journey are here. In America, you stay here. It didn't feel like a top-down instruction. It was from my bones up. It was from myself, my true knowing essence. And instantly, I was done. I never gave it another thought. I surrendered that this was the life for me here. And it's been a life of tremendous healing not just of myself, which there's been much to do, healing for our cultures that commingle and exist here and that struggle with one another. It's been a great deal about that, and I'm so glad that I listened because I opted to bring light, the purity that I knew here. I opted to reseed it. We can return to that purity. It takes, though, being willing to sit with discomfort at times, to sit with the wounds within ourselves as well as the wounds of others, and patiently offer the presence That is the only medium for truly unwinding those old traumas that live in the neural tissues of our bodies, as well as our psyches. And it takes addressing our deepest ideas, our most rooted ones that are based in illusion, in cultural dogma, not in love's wise, enlightening truth. Many years later, I was speaking with someone who described and put herself out there as an intuitive. And not knowing anything about my journey to Botswana, she told me that I had been an African. I was inquiring to see if anything she would say would resonate inside me as to the mystery of my lifelong disease, because Lyme disease is such a strange condition. It comes and goes in ways that are very wily, very mercurial, and sometimes it literally has me on my back. I wanted to understand that level of chronic fatigue that it brings on and to look outside the box of the biochemistry of it all, the spirochetes, organisms. Like, is there anything else here that is alchemical, or a bigger picture on a spirit level? I had already found that yes, there's so much to learn from and develop in myself through illness. And I wanted to gain even bigger picture perspectives if they were to be had. She gazed at me a while, this woman, and then out of nowhere asked me first if I had ever read a particular book, A Bridge Across Forever. It just so happened I had read that book. I had finished it only a month or so before meeting her, and it was the only actual book I had read in years. I was baffled. Then she told me resolutely, "Do you understand that time is illusory on a certain level? That we are living many lives. We are experiencing many forms of our own consciousness simultaneously?" This was a mind bender for sure. She then said, "You have been, you were in your linear past, a lifetime where you were African. You were living in a place that was war-torn, and all of your people there were at risk of being sucked into that violence, either as victims or as soldiers, and you wanted better for them and for yourself. You were looked to for your capacity to lead as a shaman, as a healer, and so you did. You offered to a small group of people who you had it could make the journey to take a trek across a very arid place, to a place where they could live peacefully and find abundance and thrive, to a safe zone of sorts, although it was very unknown as to whether you could make it. It wasn't a journey any of you had done before, and you knew, all of you knew going in, that you would possibly die of starvation or just not be able to pull it off. And it was that worth it. The war was that heavy in your lives that it seemed a better option, a better risk to take. And so you did. And you essentially, as that lead dog, that person of responsibility, who knew how to do such things, you opted to eat and drink less than the others, and to give of what you had in your rations to help them continue on. And you used the powers that you had developed inside through your practices to sustain yourself. And you got to where you could see. You could see that water. You could see that life in your vision in the distance physically, shimmering. You could see it, and that your group would make it. And you died right there. You died before you got there. But you knew they would make it. You knew it. And in this life, you are still identified with her. And in a way, you're still helping her to get that group as far as you can. In that timelessness where now is always, where now holds and contains all of these lives occurring simultaneously, you're still helping her, that part of you, that expression of you that you were then. You're feeding her energy to get her as far as she got. And that fatigue that you experience is a part of the picture and is in this way explained. It sounded interesting, outlandish. Something in me really related to it. And of course, I had had that homecoming in Botswana. This woman knew nothing of that emotionally explosive, unexplainable homecoming. I hadn't told almost anyone about that experience, let alone her. So for me, this all was intriguing, to say the least. And I said, well, what good is this information, though? What good is it to know this? She replied, knowing this, you can more consciously reach out to her, reach out to your other lives that you've experienced and lived through, and call on the resources among you, among that collective consciousness, these different facets of yourself, to assist her so that it's not all on you. You can also decide to not overly identify with her in the way that you have on some level of your being, and see how this helps or not for your present circumstance. And I said, well, how would I reach out, though, to these other limbs of the tree that are myself? It's all beyond my bandwidth as far as the how and the what. And she said, use a drum. Do you have a drum? I had been gifted a drum, a beautiful native one, not a week or two before having this conversation. I had just been given such a drum. She said, perfect. So I did it. I used it and I called out. And I felt so weird doing it, so weird. And I called out to my other selves. I said, please help me. Please help me help this dear one who I had come to know inside myself as Sowelo. Help me help Sowelo so that I too can have what I need to get through this life with greater capacity. I did it. And I used the drum. From there it was like, well, we'll see. I sensed that I had gotten through, and who knows. And then about a week later, I was just waking up in a motel in a random place on a journey with a loved one. And in that liminal space when you're disoriented and just waking up and things are otherworldly, in my first inkling of consciousness, I felt this drumming. It was literally vibrating inside my body. It registered as a response to my plea. What I recall about the rhythm was that it was the opposite energy to the one I had generated. It was a yin to my yang. It offered balancing to me, and I woke up and knew. I was being led to understand, this is real. We've heard you. Let's see what we can do. Years have passed since then. During those years, I would go in and out of thinking much about all this. One day, though, I got a hankering to know if all this is true. And where was she? Where would Sowelo have actually been? Is it related to the Botswana scenario of my childhood after all? So I started looking up the areas, the countries adjacent to the Okavango Delta and their histories. As it turns out, exactly in the same time frame, Sowelo had apparently taken her epic journey and passed away. The southwestern region of Africa, what is today known as Namibia and Angola, were embroiled in a war of independence against their vying colonial powers, those being Germany and Portugal. This was the mid-1970s, and the people were rising up and saying, we've had enough of these overlords. We want our freedom. The UN was involved as well as the US. Things had become extremely violent all through that area, and people were looking to escape and seek refuge. They aimed for Botswana primarily because, as a country, it had achieved its independence from Britain, mostly non-violently in the 60s, and it was known throughout the region as a place of neutrality and peace in South Africa, in southern Africa. Many people were known to come there to escape the violence, and sometimes they would stay and their families would turn that into their new home. In order to get there, that incredibly watery land that is full of abundance of life of all kinds, in the north of Botswana, you have to cross very arid country. It would be a dangerous trip, and if you got there, you would be amazed at yourself. I didn't get there, according to that story. I didn't get there. I got there this time instead, in this life. And that showed me at an early age. Not even knowing yet all these details, I knew in my bones that this is not the only life we live, or there is no other way to explain why I would feel so back where I belonged, where I came from. It is also true that a year ago on a tiny island in the Pacific Northwest, I came across 2 South Africans working a quiet pizzeria. They immediately felt like my people, so I inquired about them. They lived lives of service, heading up several nonprofits back home. They came to America to gather money and bring it back. As I came to learn, their family was originally from Botswana, and before that from the lands west of there. I had found and was casually talking suddenly with people that could easily have been family to me. They carried that same purity I remembered. As my partner and I left the pizzeria, one shouted across the restaurant at us, "I love that you are so positive. Stay positive. You have made my day." I wasn't going to tell this story. I wasn't. It's too out there. It's all too unconfirmable. A lot of details are there that are remarkable, though. One day while researching unrelated topics, I came upon a video of a whistleblower who had worked as head of operations for the CIA in that Namibia-Angola region during that exact time Cybele was there. He explained how the CIA, on behalf of America and working closely with the United Nations, would work to foment, and did so in that region, confusion, and would manipulate the people, all to weaken the efforts being made towards independence and to thereby prolong colonialist power in those regions. I was watching the man who was in large part responsible for, if this story of Cybele is true, my own people having to flee, as well as for my subsequent death. How can that be? That, for me, is a type of a confirmation. Nothing that I can prove, no. And yet so many times such strange things come upon. I can only go to my core with them, the gathering of evidence not even always sought after. Bringing these bits and pieces, I take these to my core where no one needs to agree, no one needs to understand. And I ask, what do I know of this? And what I do know is there's something to it all. And I know it because knowing it fills me with light. It feeds the gentle strength of my awareness that we are all us. We are a sacred us. Last night, as I was praying into what to share in this broadcast, I was falling asleep in the arms of my love. All of a sudden, we both heard a noise we didn't know what to make of at first. Was it inside the house, outside? Was it a bomb going off somewhere? What was it? I'd never heard a noise like that in my life. It was resonant, it had a popping of a kind, and then a yoingy ring to it. And then my partner said to me, "Hides, I think that was the drum." And that was it. The big African drum that I have sitting by the window. Sowelo speaking to me and telling me to share our story here tonight. That this was important to release to all of your hearts in the telling of our tale. It is a story of us all. That song that lights up my heart when I hear it, that played as an opener here, that song is full of the victory of the soul that knows that even when we don't get there in one life, we get there always ultimately. We always come home, and we are home. We're home all the time. In that way, we don't need to fear the leaving. The returning is assured to us. Embracing that awareness changes everything.
Helele watsubaya chabula bo. Halala watsubaya chabula bo. Halala watsubaya chabula bo. Helele watsubaya chabula bo. Watsubangoma chabuyo. Halala watsubangoma chabuyo.
La la
halala batse bangoma chau yo halala batse bangoma chau yo halala batse bangoma chau